Hi everyone, Leah here from EurekaCrystalBeads.com with another fun beading video for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to go check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll always know when we're posting new content. Okay, today's project is going to be an on-the-fly design bracelet. So I don't have much of a plan except for the pieces I'm going to be using, and those are some beautiful selections from our Pumpkin Festival collection over on EurekaCrystalBeads.com, which is available now. I'm going to be using nothing but pieces from that collection with the exception of two items, and that will be some soft flex beading wire, so you likely already have this in your stash, and possibly a crimp bead, also something you probably already have in your stash. Everything else is going to be from that beautiful collection, including one of the pieces I'm most excited about, which is this really beautiful button that has this oxidized patinaed copper look, which I think is beautiful. It adds a little bit of pop of color, and the other pop that we're going to get is from this beautiful sort of burnt orange fire polish. Okay, first let's focus a bit on some of our main players here. So these are the pieces that I know I'm going to be using because they're going to be the structure of the bracelet. So I have my eye pins here, really fun antique copper eye pins. I of course have that beautiful button, which is going to serve as my clasp. We'll see how I figure out how to do the loop on the other end. Haven't gotten that far yet. And then we have some antique copper chain. And I do want to point out this chain is a really great one because all the links are soldered shut. And that's more difficult to find on chain where we're dealing with links that are larger. Usually those links are open links. In this case, this is a nice strong chain. So I'm a big fan of this one. As far as tools go, we're going to be using our standard wire working tools. So we have our side cutter, we have our round nose pliers, and we have our chain nose pliers. And just as a quick review, our round nose pliers are kind of like two ice cream cones. There's no flat edges in there. And our chain nose pliers are flat on the inside and smooth, and they taper to a point, which does make them different than flat nose pliers, which come to a square tip. These are my favorite pliers ever, by the way. I find I get the most use out of them. So I'm going to start with an eye pin and my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to swivel that loop open to the side. That's always how you should open a loop, by swiveling to the side. And we're going to see about getting this onto our button here, and then we're going to swivel it shut. Okay, so our button is now at least somewhat attached to something. So now I think I'm going to bring in maybe some of these fire polish here. I love this sort of burnt orange color. And I think also I'm going to bring in maybe a little antique copper spacer bead. And as I'm sure you can tell, this is a very fall themed collection, though hey, if you like these colors all year round, more power to you. But I love these fall colors, and I love copper and antique copper findings for fall themed jewelry. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to roll a loop on the other side, and from that loop we're going to attach our chain. So grab right above that bead. Now I'm going to move it up a hair so that way when I make this 90-degree bend, I don't crack that fire polish bead. I'm going to cut some of that off. Now I'm going to roll a loop. And I am going to roll that loop completely shut, and then I will swivel it back open to add the chain. But I wanted to form that circle completely first. All right, now why don't we do maybe we'll do a double chain. Maybe we'll have two pieces of chain coming off of this, which could be interesting. And the best way you can do that when you have a really long piece of chain is don't cut your chain right away. Don't automatically cut these shorter pieces that you think are going to be perfect. Work with the long chain, and here are your two ends, because then you have the rest of the chain to figure out your exact length. Okay, let's get that in there. Okay, now let's swivel that loop shut again. Okay, So we have a nice little start there. Beautiful little start to our bracelet. And now what we can start to do is cut into this chain, and we can cut a link away and then reattach with an eye pin, and with a bead or beads on that eye pin, we pull the chain back together. And this can be a really fun way to embed bead or beads into your chain. And I think what I want to do is maybe stagger those beads. So I have these beautiful vintage crystal here, part of your collection. And what's great, if you're not familiar with our collections, everything is numbered and it corresponds to a item list. So you'll always know what exactly you're working with, and it even has an item SKU. That way, if you want to reorder anything, it's very easy to do so. So that's what those numbers mean, in case you happen to see them on the little baggies. When I have these really great little bead caps. So I think we're going to work with some of those as well. If you've never worked with a bead cap before, they're a lot of fun because you can just kind of cap a bead beautifully on either side. So what we're going to start to do is we're going to put the bead cap on first, and the crystal, and then the other bead cap, and we'll see how much room we have left over. All right, so we have enough room left over to add on a little fire polish bead on each side. So I think I'm going to do that. I want to sort of carry that orange, that nice burnt orange color throughout the bracelet, because it's one of the few pops of color we really have, aside from that lovely turquoise in that button, which again I think is just a beautiful color to mix with copper. All right, so you have a beautiful little link there, and that will end up getting right embedded into our chain. So we're going to do just like what we did before, which is to roll a loop on the other side. And here's a little tip for you. Whenever you're doing any kind of wire link jewelry like this, whether it's links that are going to embed into chain, or more specifically when you're going to have links linked together, you want to have the loops going in opposite directions. So if you can look through this loop, you want this loop to go the other way. And you're going to notice that in a lot of older vintage chain link jewelry, the loops are always going opposite, and they will oftentimes sit a little easier as you wear the jewelry, and they'll kink up less when you have that happen. And I actually don't really think I have to trim off much of anything, so I'm going to leave that. That sort of worked out pretty perfectly. I'm going to grab my round nose pliers to make my loop. And if you're unfamiliar with some of the techniques I'm using, like rolling a loop, we do have some great beginner videos on the Eureka Crystal Beads YouTube channel that will go over it a lot more slowly and in more granular detail. So if I go too fast, those videos may be good foundation videos for you to watch first. All right, so my loops aren't quite going opposite, so I'm just going to grab one and then twist the other one. So that's what you want to see. We can look through one, and then to look through the other one, we'd have to turn it. That's what you want to see. So now let me move some of this stuff out of the way here until I need it. Let's see, maybe we'll put this first one about there. So why don't we cut this third link. And now we're going to attach it back together with our little link that we made. So you're going to go back to that loop and you're going to swivel it open. You're going to put one side of your chain in there, and then you're going to swivel it back shut. Then you're going to go to this other side, swivel it open, and then add that on and swivel it back shut. You want to really make sure that your loops are closed completely, because if they're open at all, even just a little bit, that chain could come out of that little opening. So it's very important that you really look closely, put on your best magnifying glasses if you need them, have your best lighting. You want to make sure those loops are shut all the way. So that's what we have us start with. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to cut away, and I'm going to get a few more of these crystal links embedded into our chain, and I will come back in just a minute to show you what I have. Okay, so this is what I have now. I've added in 3 focal crystals here. Now, measuring, you might be asking, well, how do I know that I'm making this the right size? Okay, so here are some design tips. So when you're making a design like this, always shoot to be shorter rather than longer. Now, because there's chain, you can fix it either way if you end up too short or too long, but it's a lot easier to start with it too short and add length, because you can just cut into the chain in little places and add in more length. So you can easily add length. but to make something shorter that's too long, you're having to cut out pieces of chain and then put in links that are still smaller to attach it back together. So it's possible, it's just a little more complicated. So I've started off again on the shorter side. I want this to be the center of my bracelet. So let's take a look at where I'm measuring right now. Say I want to make a 7.5-inch bracelet approximately. Okay, that means I want the center to be in the middle of that mark. So for example, if I place my center at the 3 mark, that means that I have to make it to the end of my ruler to be a 6-inch bracelet. So this would be a 7-inch bracelet, and then right here would be our 7.5-inch mark. So at the very middle of our bracelet, 3 3/4 inches is where we want our center. And you can see the length we have on the other side that we have to make up to get us there. So again, shoot for shorter rather than longer because you can add length. So at this point, my chain section is done. And you might be saying, well, why? Because you're not at your length yet. Why did you cut your chain, Leah? Well, because I had to think about some ideas for making a beaded loop. So this is where our soft flex is going to come into play and some crimp beads. And again, I am just winging this a little bit. Let me just move my tape measure over here. I am just winging this a little bit. We're going to need our flex cutters now because we're dealing with some soft flex. And because we have crimp beads, we're of course going to be needing our crimper tool. Let me grab that guy out here. This is our standard crimper tool for a standard 2 by 2 millimeter crimp bead. So let's see what we're going to do here. I think that the best thing you can do when you are making a bracelet or necklace or anything where you're using a button as your closure is to get the button situated first. Once your button is situated, it's going to be a lot easier for you to figure out how big you need your loop to be. So I'm going to start in the center of my soft flex. I think I'm going to use these beautiful demis. I'm going to dump out some of those. And we're going to use these as our beaded loop. And I love them. They're not quite a copper color, but they're still going to go beautifully with this. As you can see, they match very closely, and they're just going to go beautifully with this overall theme. So I'm going to go ahead and get some of these strung up in the center of my wire so I can show you how we're going to start to put our loop together. Okay, I have my demi beads strung up here on the middle of a piece of soft flex. And as far as how many demi beads I used for this button, I have strung up here about 1 3/4 inch. I think it's maybe 1 or 2 demi beads shy of 1 3/4 inch. And I have both ends of my soft flex also strung through a fire polish bead here. And what I want to do now, though, is I want to loosen up the fire polish bead and pull one of the ends longer, and then loosen it up again and pull that end longer. What we want to do is have one piece very short and one piece very long. And the reason is because this piece is going to end up getting cut off. We're going to slide a crimp bead over this, and we're going to crimp it. And we'll leave a little bit on that we can feed through some beads, but otherwise this will get cut off, and we will have this long piece to work with. So I'm going to pick up one of my crimp beads here. And a little tip for you, if you find that you don't have a crimp that matches your color scheme here, you can use a crimp cover that does. So if I only had a gold or a silver crimp, but I have a copper crimp cover, there you go, problem solved, because the crimp won't be seen. In this case, I'm not worried too much about it because my crimp does match the rest of my ensemble here, though you can certainly use a crimp cover anyway, just to put over it because you like it. Now, another tip for you is that if you don't have a crimp that matches your theme, and maybe you don't have a crimp cover that matches your theme, so say you're stuck with a gold or a silver crimp, or a gold or a silver crimp cover, what you can do is you can work a little gold or silver into the rest of the bracelet, which will visually make your gold or silver crimp or crimp cover make a little more sense. So those are just some little design tips for you. Now I'm going to be using my crimper tool here, and I'm going to stick it into that first chamber, which is the one that looks a little like a kidney bean. If you've never crimped before, has a little indentation into it, and that way when we squish our crimp, it turns it into a little kidney bean. I'm going to turn that kidney bean up on its side and put it in the front chamber and squish our kidney bean in half. Give it a little tug, make sure it's really stuck there. Looks pretty good. Now, I never like to cut a wire right next to the crimp bead because I think you always take a chance that in the event that you didn't crimp very well, if it starts to slide out, it's going to instantly slide out and your bracelet will fall off. So I like to leave a little smidge in there. That way it gives you a little bit of notice. If this loop starts to look a little bigger and have more wire showing, then you know that your wire is starting to slip. So I think it just gives you a little bit of a safeguard. So I'm going to leave a little bit of wire there. And we'll end up feeding some beads over this so it'll be camouflaged. So I think we're going to use maybe a little more fire polish and maybe one of these great little copper beads here too. So let's add on our fire polish here. And I already know that it should float right over that little tail because I have two pieces going through that first one. There we go. Slides right over it. And then we can put our little spacer bead here. That's going to go over the rest. And then that other fire polish bead to kind of nestle right in. We have a nice little area here. Now, connecting this all together. So what we're going to need is our beaded loop to be over here. So we're going to end up crimping a little beaded loop using more demis, and we're going to crimp to both of these links together, and that's going to pull our bracelet together again. I think we're going to need another crimp bead. We'll need a few of our demis. Just dump out a little bit here. These are great because due to their shape, if you have to do something where you need seed beads, because they're a little bit more squished in their shape, they will do the same job, but they will have a different texture to them, which I really, really like. So we're going to put on just a small amount of demis. And these are going to float right through that link, so I think it'll look pretty nice. I think this is definitely going to look like a very funky, eclectic bracelet. So I have on there about 9 of them, so we'll see how that looks. I'm going to put it through both end links of our chain here. And again, I'm designing on the fly, so we'll see. We'll see if this works or not. We're going to pull back through our crimp bead, and let's see if we can get back through that other fire polish bead after all. Yes, we are. We are getting back through it. Fantastic. This one's a little tight, but it's doable, so I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers here to help me out and to pull it through. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, as you start to pull this down, as you can see, it all starts to close up. You might have to re-loosen things to keep pulling. Okay. There we go. That's our look there. It's going to hold our chain together. Again, gives it kind of cool texture. This is how our button's going to go through. It's going to keep our bracelet on. I think we're going to be a bit short on length, but that's fine because I can always make this longer. And I think just so that spacer straightens out, I'm going to feed this through the spacer too, and that won't give me any problem at all. Good, good, good. Loving it. All right, now let's get our crimp bead crimped. You're just going to want to be really careful as you're crimping because you want to make sure that only your crimp bead is in those pliers and you have none of your demi beads sneaking in there because you don't want to crack any of them. Okay, we got our little kidney bean. Get our kidney bean up on its side. Sometimes I find it helpful to turn and look right at it from the front. Give it a squish. Sometimes I'll go back in with my chain nose pliers just a little bit if I feel like one side didn't quite get enough. All right, let's get this trimmed off. Now, and I love flex wire cutters because they're going to get you in there nice and tight. Good, good close-up cut. Mine are not super new, so they're not the sharpest things in the world anymore. All right, so we have this cool little way that we've ended. And again, if you have crimp covers, you can certainly add some crimp covers over your crimp beads. Let's see how we're doing on length here. And let's take a look. Another thing to keep in mind is your loop is going to add length as well. Okay. We are at 6.5 inches. I know that you just barely can't see what's over there. There we go. We're about 6.5 inches. So I do know that I have to add in a little bit more. So again, super easy. All we're going to be doing is grabbing some more of those eye pins. And I think I'm going to start with just 2. To add length equally to either side, I want to add the same thing to either side. So I'm going to start by adding 1 new section on this side and 1 new section on this side. So let's see. I happen to have a link right there in the middle. When possible, I like to leave sections of link that are odd numbers. That way, if I have to cut one right out of the center, kind of works nicely because now I have 3 and 3 there. So what do we want our link to be? Why don't we use this great little spacer bead, which I really, really like. And again, we'll tie in a little bit more of our fire polish into there. So feed this through. Eye pin or head pin that's a little bit wonky, you can just straighten it right out. No big deal. Let's get that on there. Let's get this on there. And then let's get the other little fire polish on there. So you're not only going to get the length from this link from the beads, but also take into account the loop that you're creating on either side. That's also going to add in length for you. So just something to keep in mind as you're choosing beads to create more length. It's not just the beads that are going to do that, but your loops as well. Okay, so we have our little link. Let's attach our bracelet back together. Okay, so now you're going to see that we do have one side that's a little longer. So once we add in this link to the other side, it's going to even out. Now it's up to you. You can add it here or here, but it might bother you that it's asymmetrical. So what you could also consider doing is adding in a link here and here, but then having them each be a smaller link. So I think we're going to try that. We're going to try a link and a link, but maybe with just a little fire polish here. Again, we're designing on the fly, folks. This is how the design process works. This is what I love. I think this is so much fun to do this. I know some people might find it a little stressful, but I love it because you know what? Especially with a design like this with chain and with eye pins, you can have a lot of fun playing with the different combinations. And if you don't like it, you can open that eye pin and take it out. You don't have to restring or redo an entire bracelet. You can just redo an eye pin. Okay, snip, snip. Let's get these loops rolled. Okay, let's see. Let's take a look at our other side here. Where are we as far as number? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Great. So we're going to cut that very middle link. Same thing on this other side. Cut that very middle link. Now we're going to attach it back together and we'll see where we're at as far as our length. And the other thing to remember is that with a bracelet like this, if the 2 strands are off by a hair, that's okay. As you're wearing it, it's not something that's really going to be evident. So I wouldn't stress too much about that. Again, make sure your loops are nice and closed. Okay, let's get our other link in there. Nudge that shut. Swivel open the last one. Okay, let's see, that's actually really, really good. That pretty much made them exact again. Oh, I love that. That worked out really, really well. So let's see. Still a little bit of a smaller bracelet, but Again, you can keep playing with that by adding in more and more links. So let's see where we are here on the old tape measure. Okay, that got us to almost 7 inches, almost 7 inches. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna cut away. I'm gonna add in a few more links here and there, and I'm gonna show you how we're gonna finish up. All right, we have our finished bracelet here. So let me show you what I finished up with. So to get myself that little extra length I needed to get to that desired 7.5 inch length, let me just open this up here. All I did was I created 4 more links that were just an eye pin with a fire polish bead. I added 1 to either side of the center link right here, and I added 1 to either side of our link right here. And that created the exact amount of length I needed. And lastly, I did put on some copper colored crimp covers. So everything just kind of came together nicely. I measured, I'm at exactly 7.5 inches, and we have this really fun sort of boho eclectic bracelet that is made almost entirely with our Pumpkin Festival collection. Button just sort of steals the show. I love it. It's sort of worth the price of admission, and everything else kind of just is there to accent it and show it off. So hope you guys loved it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to visit us on over at EurekaCrystalBeads.com for everything I used in this video, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.